Hello my dears and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be making a 1940s coat for a very romantic look, and we will be using one of Mrs. Depew's draft at home patterns to get it done. All right, my dears, today the pattern we will be making is actually for a friend of mine. A few months ago I said, hey, I'd love to make you something. I gave her a list of patterns and sites and said, what do you think of these? And sure enough, she found something she absolutely fell in love with. And that is this beautiful coat from the 1940s that Mrs. Depew had up on her Etsy shop website. So we will be making this. Now, for those of you who are interested in the Mrs. Depew's system, the draft at home system that comes with these little cards and measuring tapes to draft your own patterns, I will link in the description down below the video where we learned how to use this system last year, and then you can dive right in to make this pattern with us. Now, today I have already gone ahead and drafted out the pattern, and I've got my pattern pieces here on my tracing paper. The other things I have already done, I did go ahead and get a mock-up completed using these pieces. Now, because this isn't something I am making for myself, I did go out of my way to really make a decent mock-up, get a first initial fit, and then I went ahead and made a second mock-up with all of the adjustments I had done and made a few additional modifications to the pattern to make sure that my friend was getting exactly what she wanted. Now, this particular pattern from Mrs. Depew, this is the 1940s. This coat, because of the time period it was made in, it was made to fit very, very close to the body. It's not really meant, I don't think, as like your winter coat, grab it, throw it on. It's part of an entire suit. It's meant to be very tight fitting, maybe going over something very light or a camisole. And so it has a different fit than my friend was looking for. She wants this to be something that can go over an existing outfit and truly be something she can wear through the fall and then the spring months. It won't be quite heavy enough as a winter coat, but for a beautiful gown or a night out, going to the theater, etc., this will hopefully mark things off for her. So with that being said, we have made a few modifications to this pattern that change it a little bit from the original. Where the original was meant to be extremely tight-fitting to the body with not a lot of ease, we went ahead and added quite a bit of ease so that it can go up over nice blouses and gowns. That is the first modification that we did. We also made an additional modification to the sleeve length, and we did make a modification to how the back was sitting over her hips. Otherwise, because this is a self-drafted pattern, we didn't have to do too much. I took her measurements, I drafted things out, and we were pretty much on our way. We were very lucky with this particular pattern. It is meant to fit at the waist nicely and flare out over the hips, and this actually fit her at her natural waist to start off with, so got really lucky there, not having to raise the waistline or lower the waistline to make it fit. For this, we are going to be using a lovely light winter gray for the outer portion. We've got a beautiful silky print for our lining of our jacket to make it a bit fun on the inside. And then for our collar, we have this really luscious faux fur to go up and around her neck and down around the bottom of the peplum. So we do have our work cut out for us, but luckily we've already done the first bit. We've already got, I think, the hardest part out of the way. The rest of it is really getting down to putting the pieces together and making sure that we have a really high quality finish, since this is going to be a make for a friend. So let's dive right in. Let's get these pattern pieces onto our fabric, get them cut out so we can get stitching. We officially have all of our pieces cut out of our outer fabric as well as our lining material. We also have our fur collar cut out. Now, I have not cut out the fur for the bottom portion of the peplum because it really is just a small amount of fabric that's going to be lining it, like a piping. And so I'm going to wait until the end to cut a long strip of the faux fur and go ahead and put it in between the regular material and the lining material. So we'll set that aside for now. At this point, I'd like to move on to working through the pieces kind of in the same way we would work through many of our other patterns. Now, the unique thing about working with a Mrs. Depew's Draft at Home pattern is you don't have instructions, right? We normally would get our instructions out and say, okay, the first step they'd like us to do is work on the front portion of the bodice. The next step we're going to do is the back portion of the bodice. Then we're going to attach the bodice to the skirt. Then we're going to put the sleeves in, etc., etc. Because we don't have instructions for this, we're going to be relying pretty heavily on our knowledge of garment construction based on previous makes. So what are we going to do first? We're going to start with all the darts, because that's a really great place to start, and that starts to get things set up to go together nicely. Now, the front portion of our bodice has darts both in the bottom to shape the waist, as well as a bust dart across the front of the jacket. So we will be putting that into both the outer fabric as well as the lining. Next, we have darts in the collar, which allow it to kind of flare up over the back of the neck and then drape down around the front collar area. After that, there actually aren't any further darts in this pattern. A lot of the shaping that this pattern has is achieved through angles and through keeping everything slightly cut into place and allowing things to fall at natural lines, such as the natural waistline, as opposed to creating an artificial waist. So first things first, let's go ahead and tackle our darts, getting our darts put into the front bodice, as well as our darts put into the collar. All right, my dears, we officially have all of our darts in place, and I have gone ahead and given all of the darts in both the front bodice piece as well as our collar a really firm pressing. Now, I did go ahead and choose on the darts at the waistline to press them back toward the sides, and on the bust dart to press it down toward the waistline as well. I did go ahead and press the outer fabric as well as the lining to make sure everything is going to line up nice and smooth, which means we now need to move on to the next step of construction for this jacket. Now, I've got my picture here with me, and this is going to act predominantly as my guide for how to get this garment put together. Now, this does have an upper portion and then a lower peplum, which would kind of mirror a skirt. Like, you could put together the whole upper portion as the bodice and then the peplum as the skirt, and then attach the bodice to the peplum. Now, I am considering putting together the entire front and then the back, including the peplums, before attaching them to one another. And the reason I'm thinking about doing that is because of how the peplum in the back attaches to the top back of the bodice. And that is in this point, comes down here. And when I'm lining that up with the bottom peplum, it's going to create a really nice point in the back. It has to be very specific and very firm. And so I don't really want to be fighting a larger piece of garment than I need to be. So I am going to choose to put together the back portion entirely and then the front portion entirely before putting them together and adding the sleeves on. After we have completed all of those steps, I will put the collar on last. We will be doing everything twice because we are going to put together the outer shell of the coat and then the lining of the coat, and then we will be placing them into one another, putting the lining into the jacket. I will be stitching the outer portions as we go once we put those into place, and we'll talk about that later as well, but we'll very likely be hand stitching the cuffs and hand stitching around the base. So let's start by getting the outer shell of the jacket put together, and then we can go ahead and get the lining put together. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and start with the back piece and make sure we really fit this back peplum into this back piece beautifully. With the back portion of the jacket, the back upper bodice of the jacket attached to the back peplum of the jacket, we now need to move on to assembling this front portion here. So assembling this top portion of the bodice with the bottom part of the peplum. Now we have our exterior fabric here, everything has been pressed, our interior fabric, and then this is our peplum, which we will be attaching here. Now, as we can see in the picture here, we have this beautiful swoop here that comes off the front. And so that's how we will be attaching our peplum here. And because this has a gentle arc and this doesn't, this will allow this to have this lovely flare that we see right here. So we'll go ahead and get this attached to our upper piece. We will also get the lining attached as well. And once we've done that, then we can move on to putting the bodice top and back together and making sure that everything lines up. Once we've done that, we will need to move to the assembly of our sleeves. But first, let's go ahead and get our bottom portion of our peplum attached to the upper bodice. All right, my dears, and here we can see the bodice pieces put together, both of the exterior fabric as well as the interior. Now, unfortunately, for the next few clips while I'm working through the construction of the sleeves, my microphone did not work properly and all you hear is a high-pitched squeal. So let's go ahead and walk through that together. As you can see here, we have the shoulder cap of the sleeve. This leads down into the elbow portion here. And I've extended the length of the sleeve in order to allow us to tuck that up around the bottom portion of the lining later. Now this is a two-piece sleeve. It's a very traditional two-piece sleeve, the same as you would see in a suit jacket, more commonly seen today in men's suit jackets. And so the smaller piece is the under section of the arm, and the larger piece is the over section or outer section of the arm, and they come together to meet on the back side to create a nice bend at the elbow. You put these two pieces together, and then once you have assembled the sleeve in its entirety so it becomes a tube, you attach it to the jacket as you would any standard sleeve. This is a straight insert sleeve, so you won't have any type of blousing at the top. You won't have to do any type of gathering. It should fit in straight and tight, as that was the style of the pattern and the style of the pattern in the 1940s for suit jackets like these. So let's go ahead and get this put together, pinned in place, and get our sleeves assembled. All right, my dears, let's check in with our 1940s coat. We have the outer shell completed and the collar piece on. We also have the lining material completed, that entire inner jacket completed. And it's ready to go. And then I did cut out the binding for the bottom of the coat as well, and just gave it a quick pin into place to make sure I liked how it was going to fall. So now what we need to do is we need to get the fur binding around the bottom of the coat stitched into place the same way we stitched the collar into place. And then once we've done that, we can go ahead and flip the lining, put it into the jacket, and begin to hand stitch it and top stitch it into place. So first things first, let's go ahead and get the fur for the bottom portion of the jacket pinned properly into place so we can get it stitched into place. All right, we have the bottom portion of our coat put on, so the fur lining is completely on. I've also given that a firm pressing. I did press in this front area as well, and the collar has been pressed down toward the inner lining of the jacket, which means in order to complete this, we need to go ahead and get this lining inside of our coat. So I'm going to turn it completely inside out because of course we want the finished lovely side to be the one that is showing. That's going to hide all the raw edges of both the coat as well as the lining. And we're going to really just stuff it and make sure first that we're liking how everything is falling, and then if we are, we'll go ahead and press a seam allowance around the entire edge of the lining material, and that way we can go ahead and stitch it down, pulling the collar in, pulling the bottom fur up, and really get it secured into place. All right, and that looks like it's going to fit really beautifully. So here's what we'll do. We'll take this back out at the iron. We will go ahead and fold over that seam allowance, and then we will be coming up and over and stitching this down, utilizing an invisible stitch so that we won't see it on the side of the coat. It'll just cover all these raw edges on the inside. Then we will also, with an invisible stitch, tack the seams together. So where the shoulder seams are of the lining, we will tack those to the shoulder seams of the coat, coming through with just the smallest number of stitches. And that's going to keep the lining from shifting around inside the coat and making it uncomfortable. The rest of the coat will be tacked around the entirety of it, and so it won't really be going anywhere, but just to make sure that it really stays nicely in place, we will also go around the waistband with a couple of stitches, again, to make sure everything is tacked in place, it's nice and tight, and every time my friend puts this coat on, it's going to fit like a dream. All right, my dears, let's talk wrap up on this Mrs. Depew's Draft at Home 1940s coat. This ended up being quite a undertaking, quite a bit bigger than I initially thought, and as a result my friend had to wait longer for her beautiful coat than I had initially anticipated. However, in the end, I think it turned out really beautifully. It was definitely a lot of work because you really were creating two full jackets in doing a fully lined garment, but I think the end result was really stunning and it created a very professional piece. There were a few little things that we changed and added. I did have to do 3 fittings for this particular garment, but in the end, I'm not sure I would have done it any other way. Now, for the coat itself, we did go ahead and add an optional belt to it, and I think it looks really stunning with it. I did also end up taking the hand stitching out of the lining and machine stitching the lining into the jacket across the top, over the collar, and across the front bust area. And then I went ahead and hand stitched the bottom into place and of course tacked it along all of the seams as I had indicated. Overall, despite the bumps in the road, despite multiple fittings, and despite things taking a little bit longer than I had initially anticipated, I'm very happy with how this coat came out and how the garment did, and I really hope that my friend enjoys it as well and that she loves it as much as I do. If you liked this video, if you like vintage clothing, if you like costuming, I would love to have you along on my journey. Thank you so much for joining me today. Please hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. Thank you guys. Bye.